Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to do something I find absolutely fascinating. We are completely breaking down the anatomy of a marketing pitch, specifically looking at a product called the Neuro-Balance therapy. Whenever we stumble across a wellness product online, it's incredibly helpful to just look under the hood and see exactly how the information is structured to grab our attention, build trust, and ultimately present us with an offer. In this explainer, we're going to objectively map out the exact step-by-step sequence of this pitch, using only the text and claims they provide in their own materials. It's honestly a masterclass in structured persuasion, and understanding it, well, it's going to give you a completely new perspective on how wellness information is presented to us every single day. All right, let's jump right into section 1, the fear of falling. So every really effective presentation starts by identifying a core problem, right? And this pitch goes straight for a highly emotional issue. The text poses this super powerful scenario, asking, what happens when the fear of falling grips your life? This is the hook. The pitch specifically targets an audience, highlighting clients anywhere from 52 all the way up to 94 years old, who might be experiencing a loss of stability. And by using that specific phrase, gripped your life, the pitch completely elevates a physical mobility issue into a profound emotional and psychological barrier. It's not just about tripping over a rug, it's about the loss of freedom and the paralyzing anxiety that can accompany every single step. But here's the thing, the pitch doesn't rely on emotion alone. It immediately grounds this intense fear in institutional authority. Later in the presentation, it backs up the absolute severity of this issue by pointing to specific, explicit citations from major health organizations. We're talking the CDC's important facts about falls and the NIH's guidelines on preventing falls and fractures. By anchoring that deeply personal emotional fear to these massive, well-respected institutions, the pitch establishes that this isn't just in your head. It's a documented, scientifically recognized health crisis. Moving on to section 2, the proposed solution. Once that problem is firmly established, the pitch smoothly pivots right to the answer. Okay, let's dive into this. The mechanics of their proposed solution are laid out in a very precise, super easy to understand sequence. The text urges the viewer to discover this simple, yet supposedly powerful 10-second fall prevention ritual. And the goal of this little ritual? To awaken what they call the #1 deep nerve in your foot. According to the pitch, this specific nerve is the literal key to keeping you upright and stable. Also, notice the sneaky bit of urgency embedded in the text here. It prompts the user to watch the video before it is forced to be taken down. That creates immediate, intense curiosity and a real sense of scarcity around the solution. Next, the pitch sets up a really powerful contrast. On the left side, we have the starting point, that terrible fear of falling that's gripped your life. On the right side, we get the promised outcome, a quick return of confidence. The text claims that clients usually notice results within just 14 days, and sometimes a whole lot sooner. It promises that stability and strength in the lower half of your body will return quickly, allowing that fear to pack up and leave for good. This before and after picture, that is the emotional core of the entire proposed solution. Which brings us to section 3, stories of stability. Now, of course, bold claims need proof, right? This is exactly where the pitch leverages testimonials to build up social proof. And this brilliantly illustrates how the pitch appeals to our aspirations. Take Jim from Florida. He notes that Chris Wilson, the creator of the therapy, was actually his personal trainer. Jim says he's a 75-year-old guy who still works out with 45-year-olds. He specifically mentions striving for a compressed morbidity timeframe, which basically means aiming to stay highly functional and super healthy for as long as humanly possible before the end of life. This testimonial completely shifts the focus from simply, let's try not to fall, to actively reclaiming your youth and vitality. Then there's Shirley from Florida, who shares her own specific physical milestones. She mentions that balance exercises were always a part of her workout, making her feel grounded and sure on her feet. But the really key visual she paints is standing on one leg, doing exercises she thought only young athletes did. Once again, the pitch is meticulously associating this therapy not just with a baseline of safety, but with exceptional youthful capability. Another client they mentioned, John H., completely echoes this by emphasizing daily fitness as the ultimate key to healthy longevity. All right, let's look at section 4, the scientific context. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we transition to the literal foundation of these claims. It draws a direct, almost startling line between the highly emotional marketing copy we've seen and the incredibly dry clinical titles of the cited research. For instance, for the claim about awakening the deep nerve in the foot, the pitch cites a 2019 study in the wildly prestigious journal Nature, titled "Foot Callus Thickness Does Not Trade Off Protection for Tactile Sensitivity During Working." And for the claims about regaining quick balance, it cites a randomized controlled trial from the Journals of Gerontology about reactive balance training involving repeated slips and trips. The pitch is basically using these complex clinical studies as structural pillars to hold up its very accessible, consumer-friendly claims. And the breadth of this bibliography is actually quite extensive. Alongside those clinical trials, the pitch pulls in literature from the National Institutes of Health, the Centers for Disease Control, the National Safety Council regarding older adult falls, and even a mainstream New York Times article titled "Born to Walk Barefoot." By compiling this very specific list of sources, the pitch attempts to prove that its central thesis is perfectly aligned with the broader consensus of medical literature and mainstream health reporting. Finally, we hit Section 5, the final offer. This is where we reach the culmination of the pitch, where all that emotional appeal and scientific backing converge into a literal transaction. The pitch very clearly defines the deliverables, combining both physical and digital assets. When you order, you actually get a physical copy of the Neuro-Balance therapy, which includes a DVD and a specific physical tool called a spike ball, all shipped directly to your home. But to satisfy that modern desire for immediate action, it also gives you instant access to download the digital versions right away, plus some free bonuses. Then, bam, the price reveal. The pitch shows a crossed-out original price of $97, magically replaced by a discounted price of $47. It explicitly points out that you are saving $50. But honestly, more importantly, the FAQ section directly tackles a huge consumer fear. It clearly states, there are no recurring fees or secret charges. We hate those just as much as you do. It's just a one-time payment of $47. This is a classic textbook tactic to quickly remove any friction right at the point of sale. But what about the risk? Well, that brings us to the number 60. The text outlines a full 60-day money-back guarantee. It explains that 60 days is plenty of time to notice a remarkable turnaround, but hey, if the buyer isn't completely happy, they can just write or call for a full refund. In the anatomy of a marketing pitch, this is known as the risk reversal mechanism. It completely shifts the burden of risk off the shoulders of the buyer and places it squarely onto the seller. The pitch also makes sure to smooth over any lingering logistical anxieties you might have. It reassures the buyer that the transaction will actually show up as a charge from ClickBank, not Neuro-Balance therapy. It builds up trust by explaining that ClickBank is a leading online e-commerce processor that has safely processed millions of orders. Finally, it sets super clear expectations. It's a simple process, just click Add to Cart, and you can expect the whole shebang to arrive at your doorstep in between 3 and 10 business days. And wow, that brings us to the end of our structural breakdown. We've seen exactly how this pitch seamlessly weaves together the visceral, emotional fear of falling, highly aspirational testimonials, institutional scientific citations, and a completely risk-free logistical offer to create one incredibly compelling narrative. It leaves us with a critical question to ponder. How do you evaluate the science behind modern wellness products when your own balance and longevity are on the line? Because understanding how these pitches are constructed is truly the very first step in making informed, confident decisions about our health. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep asking the right questions.